let's see. Yeah, there's no requirement to how many presentations you make. So that stipend is around $20 to $30, I believe, per presentation. Virtual ETS videos, we are not sure when those will be available. We are working on those right now. I am trying to get some presentations going for schools virtually. So if you or anyone you know is looking to have an ETS presentation, please reach out to me, and I would be happy to try and get something set up virtually. The best way to reach out to our youth, that is a great question. I would venture to say that the best way to reach out to youth right now would be via social media. This is a social media generation. I think the most, the most action or interest comes from social media. All right, well, we are out of time. And yes, Faye, sorry, there is an option for presenters over the age of 35. You can be a lead presenter. So I would be happy to speak with you if you're interested. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Rachel. And we're excited about Ending the Silence. And we also have another initiative where we're building a website called NAMI Teen, which is not a live presentation. It's a website with information for teenagers. So keep your eyes open for that. We're very excited. We have a new guest coming up whose name is Kathy Milam. And Kathy was asked to join us today because she's the leader of NAMI Chattanooga. And I wanted her to talk about what happens at the local community level with NAMI. NAMI has affiliates. You could think of them as NAMI chapters in Tennessee. Most of them are run by volunteers, which Kathy is one of them. So I don't want to take more of your time. Kathy, if you could tell us kind of how you got here and what you do with your affiliate.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. NAMI as a grassroots organization. When you think of a grassroots organization, you generally think of a movement that uses people at a local level to drive change. There are thousands of types of grassroots movements that are taking on the world today, from political to social to educational. In grassroots organizations, local people take on issues and causes that are near and dear to them. And that's exactly what happens at NAMI, one of the largest grassroots mental health organizations dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans who are impacted in one way or another by mental illness. Like individuals, blades of grass that come together to form a lawn that people can walk and play on. Grassroots organizations are made up of many people coming together under one cause to form something larger than themselves. Today, there are more than 600 local NAMI affiliates across the country working at the local level. I'm proud to be the president of NAMI Chattanooga, one of those 600 hardworking affiliates. We do think of ourselves as a grassroots organization in the most literal sense of the word, because we really are a movement of people working at the local level to drive change. We know that we are stronger and able to achieve more if we work together. We believe that our work matters, and we believe that we can and will make a difference in our community. One person at a time, one conversation or phone call at a time. You can only do that at the local level. You can only reach people in need when you know the needs in your own community. We are face to face with family members who are desperate for answers. We respond to helpline calls from people who need to know where to go for help. Sometimes it's a call from a father who is unsure how to support his son with mental illness. Other times it's a sister who is having trouble getting her brother into treatment. We respond to each and every unique situation, and we care for these families like they are our own, because they are part of our NAMI family. And more often than not, they are our own family. In my case, I have traveled the rocky road of caring for my sweet daughter who has a mental disorder. She has been denied help from a system that is sometimes incapable of deciphering what's most important: the urgency of providing care or the politics of a diagnosis, and being denied treatment because she was too acute. Sometimes there are simply no beds, and my daughter has been held in a waiting room for hours overnight in a chair. I'm telling you nothing new. My point is that grassroots organizations like NAMI have been my saving grace. And from my experience, I know that we are the saving grace for many families like mine who are desperate for a helping hand and a voice of experience. We have programs to raise awareness locally about mental illness. We support families affected by mental illness, and we advocate and educate in our communities. We are a very dedicated team with boots on the ground, and we care deeply about how mental illness impacts our world. Why? Because mental illness has impacted our world in some way. This personal experience fuels each of us. I don't believe you can be an effective grassroots organization unless you are in touch with the needs of your community. You have a precise mission statement, and you have 3 to 5 shared goals that ensures your team is driving for continuous improvement. Our NAMI Chattanooga mission is to improve the quality of life for individuals with mental illness, their families, and communities through mutual support, education, and advocacy. Each year, our Chattanooga board meets to establish goals, develop our strategic plan, and plan for the future. We work closely with our local resources, the mental health providers, mental health hospitals, and local CIT officers. And above all, our affiliate values lived experience. Those who are experts in mental illness from the simple fact they've lived it. They've been through it and understand on a personal level. As a board, we meet regularly to ensure that we are staying true to our plan. This process has kept us focused on what really matters. Our goals for this year are clearly stated and measurable. And while I won't go through each one of them, I will tell you that we are all accountable in one way or another for their success. We all have a stake in making sure that we are taking our programs and initiatives to the next level because we represent some of the very people we aim to serve. We are never satisfied. Good is never good enough when it touches the lives of people who need us. We want every person in our local community who needs NAMI to know our name and that we are here for them. We advocate with our local government leaders and promote legislation to benefit the mentally ill. Through our education classes, we help people learn how to deal with a family member with a mental disorder and how to handle a crisis. Our programs, including the classes, are a source of many of our passionate volunteers and team members. The majority of those running NAMI Chattanooga have direct experience with what we offer and are able to speak on this. This strengthens us. We help people network and get in touch with the best organizations and medical resources. I can't tell you how often we hear people say they didn't know where to turn for help, or they didn't know the services were available to them. Unfortunately, we also hear all too often that there's just not enough services available for people who really need it. And that's what keeps us motivated. In addition to helping folks one-on-one and in our classes and support groups, we advocate for change on a local, statewide, and national level. We push for the lived experience voice to be present in meetings where decisions about the people we serve are being made, which isn't always the case. In Chattanooga, we have had some wins and we have had some heartaches, but I can tell you that every day for us is a new opportunity to help make a difference. Working with NAMI at the local level has been challenging, inspirational, and a gift for me. I believe the NAMI affiliate truly are the lifeblood of our organization, and I couldn't be more proud of our Chattanooga team.
Thank you, Kathy. And I'm looking at my time. I think we have a couple minutes before our planned break. If you want to know more about your affiliate, I will let you know that at namitn.org, we have a list of local affiliates. There's around 20 of them throughout Tennessee. And I hope that you got a flavor for what this is about with our affiliates. And so I'm gonna look to the chat to see. The other thing I'll just mention just quickly is that affiliates really lead the way with a lot of the classes and support groups. So we work together with them to make sure that they have trained teachers, but the support groups are run by affiliates. The classes are promoted and run together with NAMI Tennessee. Now that it's virtual, you can join really from anywhere. And let's see, I think we can break a minute or two early, that's okay, unless anybody has, let's see, there's a question here. It's a comment really about youth, about, you can just read the comment that we need to help youth learn earlier if there's some kind of an issue. Kathy, do you want to say something about your Mental Illness Awareness Week programs coming up?
Oh, I'd love to. We have a series of webinars starting October the 4th or the 3rd through the 9th. And you can go to our website, namichattanooga.org, and register. We have a wide range of people to speak. We have people from the mental health court. We have CIT officers. We have a family therapist on the effects of a couple dealing with a mentally ill child in the family. We have a therapist to talk about EMDR therapy. Can't think of anything else right now. We have Elisa Leopold, who is going to talk about advocacy. We have Eve Knight. She's going to talk about how people fall through the system and don't make it to care. Tyler Davis from Erlanger is going to talk about elder care. We also have a couple of paralegals that are going to be there to talk about conservatorship.
So this is free. It's available to everybody. One of your other
free.
affiliate members has put the link into the chat box. And if
Yeah.
I hear, I think it's sniffles I hear. I hope you feel better.
Yeah, I'm fine.
But thank you. We are going on break. And when we come back right at the top of the hour, we have Dr. Charles Freed. And I think this is going to be really important. You don't want to miss it. Not only is Dr. Freed a psychiatrist and the medical director of United Healthcare Community Plan, he's also a yoga instructor and trained and a practitioner of holistic and integrative care for mental health, which is the first time I've met a psychiatrist that's trained in this area. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you all for tuning in. We're back in 5. Stretch your legs, come back, and we'll continue with the program. Thank you all. We're now on break.
How long has VistaPoints been in business, and what sets them apart from other providers?
I'm so glad you asked that. VistaPoints has been in existence now for 20 years, which is just remarkable. What sets us apart from other trust companies is how we work one-on-one with each beneficiary and the family members. We many times go to the person's home or where they're residing and meet with everyone, answer their questions. We find out what their needs are and what their desires are, and we work with them to use their trust money to help them live a better quality of life and give the family peace of mind, knowing their loved one is being well cared for.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, hello.
Hey there.
Okay, we're ready to go. If you're ready. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Can you put on your camera?
Hold on. There we go.
Excellent. Okay, David, we're ready when you are.
Hey, David.
Hi. Go
Can
for it.
you remind me how I pull up my deck? I don't do it here, do I?
Yeah, you will just open your PowerPoint and then click the share screen button like we practiced.
All right, gotcha. It's over on the left, on the bottom, right?
Yes,
Which icon is it?
it should be the far right icon. It looks like a little presentation screen.
You good to go?
Then you just have to press the share screen button on Zoom.
And where is that? I see the icons on the lower left. Which one?
It's the middle one, it's green.
Oh, I don't see that one.
On the Zoom window,
No, I do not. Hold on. Sorry about this.
no worries. Do you have your presentation open now?
It's open. I just need to figure out where that icon is. Now, let me see. I have it open on both screens.
Can you go back to the Zoom window?
I think I'm looking at the Zoom window.
If you hover to the bottom, there's a control panel that says mute, start video, participants, chat, and share screen.
I don't see that anywhere.
Do you see yourself?
Well, not now. I have the slide deck up.
You'll have to exit out of your slide deck to see it, I think.
Okay, gotcha.
Do you see the share screen button now?
I do now.
All right, if you click that and then select your PowerPoint.
I don't see that as an option here. Oh, wait a second.
Now we can see it. If you just press that same little button that you used to make it full screen, then it'll be good. Perfect.
All right. So we're ready to go?
Yep.
Well, welcome everyone. I am very excited to be presenting a topic that is very broad and deep in nature. And I was not certain when I was preparing this exactly what the expectations and more importantly, what the level of knowledge and awareness of the participants might be around the concept of holistic medicine. So what I did was I created kind of a broad overview. There are many topics we're going to touch on that themselves could be subjects or topics for an hour-long lecture. So I just want to make you aware of certain considerations in regard to holistic medicine that I think will help position you to understand what the purpose of this is and what are the types of things that a holistic medicine provider does. Let's jump in with the definition of holistic medicine. This is a form of healing that considers the whole person, the body, mind, spirit, and emotions. And the whole person is made up of independent parts, such that if one part is not working properly, the other parts are going to be affected. So if you have, be it physical, emotional, or spiritual, then it can negatively affect all the other areas. We also believe that the body is prepared to take care of itself under normal circumstances. So when there are interferences in our physical, emotional, or spiritual state, they will cause disturbances. And our goal is to find those disturbances, called root causes, eliminate them, and allow the body to do its wonderful work. As I mentioned, we look for root causes. I'll explain that in a little more detail momentarily. But root causes can give rise to many different conditions, and many conditions can have only one root cause. I want to mention briefly complementary and alternative medicine, or CAM as it's sometimes referred to. Complementary merely refers to an intervention that is used along with an allopathic approach. And an example of this would be a provider treating chronic back pain who recommends to the patient that they seek acupuncture services. The acupuncture is the complementary service. In contrast, alternative medicine refers to something that is used in place of a traditional allopathic intervention. And an example of that would be acupuncture by itself to treat chronic pain. Allopathic merely means or refers to traditional Western medicine. These are some of the principles of holistic medicine. That unconditional love and support is the most powerful healer, and a person is ultimately responsible for his or her own health and well-being. Treatment involves fixing the cause of the condition, not just alleviating symptoms. All people have innate healing powers, and the patient is a person, not a disease. Here we're going to talk about the concept of root cause. This is an initiating cause of a causal chain which leads to an outcome or effect of interest. An example would be depression that results from low serotonin levels. But that's not the root cause. The root cause would be whatever is causing the low serotonin level. Finding root causes requires a detailed understanding of a patient's genetic profile, their biochemistry, and various lifestyle factors. Then we use that information to develop a personalized treatment plan. By addressing root causes as opposed to symptoms, we become oriented to identifying the complexity of the disease. And remember, there may be one condition that has many different causes, and one cause may result in many different conditions. This is from the Institute of Functional Medicine, and there is their website, which you may find of interest. Before I go further, I want to advise that you become an informed consumer. And when you're considering complementary health approaches, it's important to take charge of your health by being informed. Find out and consider what scientific studies have been done on the safety and effectiveness of the product or practice that interests you. A lot of people believe that the supplements that we tend to use in holistic medicine, that because they're natural, they're better, healthier, and safer than unnatural or synthetic drugs. All natural medicines are not without side effects. And in addition, it's important to understand that natural medicines can conflict with prescribed medication because they're often metabolized by the same P450 enzyme system in the liver. Another point of mentioning that is you want your your allopathic prescribing provider to be aware of supplements that you may be taking. And natural doesn't always mean it's healthy. There are many natural substances like belladonna alkaloid that are toxic to humans. A lot of mushroom species are toxic to humans, yet they're natural. Put this in your hip pocket for future reference. The website nccih.org nih.gov. That's the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. And this website has a wealth of information about supplements, about research that we have available to treat various disease states, and conditions. So you can go to that site, you can look up an herbal remedy, you can look up a physical condition that you might have or someone you know might have, and you can see how the research lines up. I do want to caution you that oftentimes this website will use language that says there is insufficient evidence to suggest this is helpful. That's not the same as saying it's not helpful. All it's saying is that there isn't research that clearly demonstrates it is, and there's no evidence that clearly demonstrates it is not. Be cautious and appropriately skeptical about claims made by companies selling supplements. You get this all the time in your email. Always buy supplements from manufacturers who use third-party testing. And remember that a supplement may work for you or a family member, but that doesn't mean that it will work for you, and in some cases can actually worsen your symptoms. One of the things about holistic medicine that is somewhat of a barrier is that most providers do not accept insurance for payment. And for those who do, insurance doesn't necessarily cover all the costs. And this is particularly true for specialized lab studies that we perform. I'll talk a little bit later about one or two lab tests. This was an article on NPR. It's about the Government Accountability Office having conducted some research on supplements and supplement claims. And they found that, as you can see here, many were misleading. Some of the supplements contain trace contaminants such as heavy metals and pesticides. And they released a startling report. It said things that, well, they found that dozens of supplements were found that contain trace amounts of contaminants rather. They also found that many of the contents listed on the bottles were not actually present, or present in much smaller percentages than indicated. So the labeling was not necessarily reflective of what was in the tablet or capsule you might be taking. As I think we're all aware, manufacturers are not really allowed to claim their products cure disease. You see that little caveat, that disclaimer on a lot of websites that you might see. And however, even though they're making that statement, when you read pages and pages of how beneficial this particular supplement might be, it carries a lot of weight and influence, and a lot of people kind of disregard that disclaimer. Now we're going to talk about some interesting facts here, starting with the human body. We have about 6 to 8 trillion human cells in our body. Actually, there are many more, and we'll talk about that separate, many more cells, but 6 to 8 trillion human cells. Red blood cells account for about 80% of them. There's 171 billion neurons in the human brain. There's another 85 billion that support those neurons, and they're called astrocytes. Each neuron connects to up to 1 million other neurons. So you can see how complex the brain is just from its architecture. Now here's the zinger. In your gut, you have an ecosystem of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other prokaryotic organisms. We call this the microbiome. In your microbiome, in your intestine, you have 100 trillion different types of organisms. And it comprises what we now call the gut-brain connection. Some even call this the gut-brain immune connection, because we're aware that in addition to the brain having a connection directly to the gut through the vagus nerve, that the immune system to the bloodstream also has a direct connection with the gut. And the gut is your immune system first sniff of whatever you put in your body. And it will make a determination of whether it's acceptable or not from an immunologic standpoint. I like this slide because it talks about different facts related to your brain. I'll let you look over this while I pull out some of them. The 60% of your brain is fat. 25% of the total cholesterol in your body resides in your brain. Cholesterol has been vilified, but it's important to understand that cholesterol is an important constituent for us to consume because it plays a critical role in creation of phospholipids that wrap around your brain cells and improve conduction of messages, as well as its involvement in the development of various hormones, including sex hormones. And 95% of your decisions take part in the subconscious part of your mind. So that concept about you only use 10% of your brain is totally inaccurate. Your brain weighs about 3 pounds and it has the consistency of tofu. Here's another interesting one. Men's brains are generally 10% bigger than women's. However, size does not indicate power. Albert Einstein, for example, had a smaller than average brain size. So men, don't let that go to your head. That was a joke there. Now we're going to move on to the microbiome that I introduced earlier. As I said, 100 trillion microorganisms are in your gut, and we want them there. When this 95% of our microbiota is located in the GI system, microbiota refers to an organization of microbacteria within our body system, one being in the gut, and who would like to guess where the other microbiota or microbiome is? It's your skin. You have loads of bacteria lining your skin and comprise a microbiota by itself. Microbiota is basically the plural of microbiome. The ratio of viruses to bacteria, 5 to 1. 90%, I love this statistic. We're gonna talk about this later, but 90% of disease can be related in some way to the gut and the health of the microbiome. Even Hippocrates Hippocrates knew that chronic illness had its origins in the gut. Let's talk a little bit about some of the functions of the microbiome. You can see here that it produces neurotransmitters. That is very true. 90% of the serotonin in your body is produced in your GI system. Through not as much through the microorganisms, but you have what are called enterochromaffin cells that line your GI tract. And the lion's share of serotonin comes from those cells. Now, you would think, okay, well, we produce a lot of serotonin then. How can we ever have low serotonin levels in the brain? Low serotonin, as you all know, I believe, is the imputed cause of depression. The answer to why you can have an abundance of serotonin in your body and not your brain is that serotonin and other neurotransmitters do not cross the blood-brain barrier. The way that you produce or increase levels of serotonin in your brain is to increase the substrates. And that goes back to the concept of nutrition. Eat a healthy diet and you get the vitamins and minerals that your body needs and your brain needs to function appropriately. It plays a role in inflammation through stimulation of cytokines. Cytokines just refers to chemicals in mast cells and other cells in the immune system that are destructive in nature. Their primary purpose is to destroy what your immune system identifies as foreign. However, when they're chronically released and there's nothing in particular they're defending themselves against, cytokines start to damage tissue in different parts of the body. The other functions of the microbiome, it helps to provide or improve absorption of various nutrients. It crowds out pathogens. It helps to clear drugs and toxins before they even enter your system. And it helps to maintain the intestinal permeability. The purpose of this slide is just to show you the importance from the standpoint of major depressive disorder of the microbiome. And what it did is it looked at individuals who were considered treatment resistant. They had been tried on 2 or more antidepressant agents without benefit. And then they took those individuals and looked at the ones who did respond compared to the ones who did not respond. And they noticed that for responders to antidepressants, they had higher levels of actinobacteria and bacilli, whereas those that had treatment resistance had elevations in the particular types of bacteria that you see there. Proteobacteria, Teneric cutae, Streptococcus. So the takeaway from this is if you have a healthy microbiome, you're less likely to succumb to major depressive disorder. We're going to move. We could talk again about the microbiome for quite an extended period of time, and it is totally fascinating. So I recommend that if I've piqued your interest in this, please pursue obtaining more information about the microbiome. We're going to move on to the concept of inflammation. As I indicated before, it underlies almost all chronic illnesses. Again, originates in the gut. The thing about inflammation that's kind of tricky for us to understand, we're familiar with inflammation that is acute. You have a bee sting, you get the erythema, and you get the elevation at the site and the pain. That's acute inflammation, and we're talking about chronic inflammation. Our bodies can have chronic inflammation for years before we manifest clinical symptoms of disease states. We know now, for example, that there are biomarkers, inflammatory biomarkers that we can see up to 20 years before an individual actually develops diabetes. The same for Alzheimer's disease. Inflammation has many possible causes, and they include, this is not an all-inclusive list, by the way, toxins such as heavy metals, pesticides, mold, bisphenol A, and phthalates. And let me speak briefly. I don't know how many of you might be aware of this fact, but bisphenol A is a compound found in many plastic products and many other things for that matter. Phthalates are found commonly in cosmetic agents. But back to BPA, it's known as what's called a hormone dysregulator. And it has been associated with cancer, polycystic ovary syndrome, and many other illnesses. So nowadays, you see the trend is for people who create plastic where you would hold water or food substances are BPA free. So you should always try to use plastic containers that indicate they are such, BPA free. Surprisingly, in a way, emotional trauma and stress are causes of inflammation in the body. I don't think that's surprising to individuals who treat trauma conditions, but for those who may not have much knowledge of that area, that may be a little surprising. Food intolerance or allergy is another rather common cause of inflammation. This can include, again, not all-inclusive, list of casein, gluten, oxalates, histamine, many other compounds and substances. Poor nutrition is a cause of inflammation. Inadequate sleep is a cause of inflammation, as are genetic and metabolic errors. I'll briefly mention regarding sleep that is the time when your body cleans up the immunologic system. So all of the waste products produced are cleaned up, like waste management rolling through your neighborhood early in the morning on whatever your pickup day is. That's what's happening in your body. And that's one of many reasons we require a sufficient amount of sleep. This is how inflammation affects the body. And look at the upper left, brain, pro-inflammatory cytokines. All cytokines are inflammatory, by the way. Cause autoimmune reactions in the brain, and they can lead to depression, autism, foggy brain, difficulty concentrating, memory impairment, Alzheimer's disease, even multiple sclerosis. And then you see, we won't go into any detail here, other areas that can be impacted within the body by inflammatory processes. Many different types of conditions, as I stated before, can cause chronic inflammation. Being overweight, dietary insufficiencies, early life stress, that's the adverse childhood experiences, psychosocial stress of any type, leaky gut, that is where your intestinal wall does not have the integrity that it should. So molecules that are larger than those normally entering the bloodstream through the intestine get into the bloodstream and activate. They signal the immune system to begin attacking them. So that starts quite a robust inflammatory process. And T cell dysfunction, it's not actually dysfunction. T cells are just doing their job. They're releasing cytokines when they encounter a suspected intruder. So these are causes, these are consequences. And you see here depression being one of them. Also, I think many of us are aware of the bidirectional connection between diabetes and depression. This is a partial explanation for why that happens. So where do we look for root causes? We look at your genetic profile, we look at your metabolism, and we look at lifestyle factors. Sounds pretty easy, but each of these categories are very intensive. We're going to talk about a type of genetic problem that can create trouble for us. And it relates to what's called the MTHFR SNP. SNP means single nucleotide polymorphism, and that's basically the same as genetic mutation. MTHFR stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. Say that quickly 3 times. It's an enzyme. It's responsible for converting homocysteine to methionine. Low levels of MTHFR can lead to high levels of homocysteine. Homocysteine is also an inflammatory agent. We need a little bit of it, not a lot of it. Even with this SNP, we can create that enzyme that's still operable, but it just works at diminished capacity. We can, individuals who have high homocysteine levels, we know there's many causes for it. But if one is the genetic mutation, we're able to test for it. And an individual who has a high homocysteine serum level is a candidate to get that genetic test for MTHFR. It costs about $100. Other causes of elevated homocysteine level are hypothyroidism, diabetes, being overweight, being inactive. There are certain medications. Statins are an example of those. All of these need to be ruled out in addition to the genetic contribution from MTHFR. We know that MTHFR SNPs are correlated with depression, and we're going to see some evidence of that in a subsequent slide here. It's also associated with anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and the reason for that is because MTHFR not only plays a role in development of serotonin, but all the other neurotransmitters. The treatment for this genetic mutation is just to make sure and all the other causes of, it's called hyperhomocystinemia. Just means high levels of homocysteine in the serum. The treatment is folic acid. This is the pathway that shows MTHFR over here. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but it's over on the lower left. And B2 refers to a vitamin cofactor that is required for this enzyme to function correctly. Now, when this enzyme doesn't function very well, it stops the cycle over to the right where you can see homocysteine is converted to methionine. So what do we do when we have this blockade over on the left with MTHFR? If we load the system with folic acid, we help that enzyme by creating more cofactor for the enzymes that do work adequately, so that they're able to work more efficiently, and we can normalize their function to a significant degree. This is the study I wanted to show you related to the benefit of adding folate to the diet. Enlite is a product, and I'm not endorsing Enlite, by the way. It's a product that has L-methylfolate in it. And all this graph is showing is when you add folate, you get a reduction in depression over placebo. And you can see from this study that 40% of individuals, 330 people in this study, who took L-methylfolate, a form of folate, had improvement in their depression. And even though this study is pretty well known in psychiatry, it's still, in my experience anyway, is not utilized very much in general psychiatry. And the stuff on the left just talks about other conditions that benefit from L-methylcobalamin. Dementia prevention is one of the benefits of methylfolate. Diabetic neuropathy is relieved by methylfolate. And it can be very helpful in disorders related to substance use. We're going to move on to metabolism. And I show you this slide, not that we're going to get in depth, we're going to talk in any depth about any of this. This is merely to show you the complexity of the metabolism that's going on in your body now. And I'll add, this isn't all of it. There's much more that goes on from a metabolic standpoint in your body. So how do we make sense of this? Well, we have different types of tests that aren't used routinely in allopathic medicine. An example would be the organic acid test. And what it does is it identifies various organic acids. They are the metabolic products of different cycles in the body. And we can see whether they are within normal range or they're outside. Either they're deficient or they're in abundance compared to the general population. Based on the specific organic acid that is not within the normal range, that gives us a clue as to next steps we take. And that next step could include in some cases, moving right on to recommending a particular supplement or other type of treatment, or it may result in the need for additional testing. Now, before I leave this slide, I want to remind you of how many cells we have in the human body and subtract out the red blood cells, 80%. So we have a couple trillion cells, human cells in our body. Each one of those cells undergoes 10,000 metabolic processes every second. I just find that just kind of blows my mind. We're going to move to lifestyle factors. And this, each one of these would be a good topic for additional discussion. But lifestyle factors refer to nutrition, one of the most important of all of these. Exercise and movement, sleep, stress management, spirituality, connectedness. How our human bodies are oriented to be connected to others. Now, there are some people who appear not to need that, but most of us need that sense of community and connection. And we know, for example, women who have breast cancer, when they attend group and they maintain that community connection, they fare better than women who don't have that particular type of group activity. Now, group is not community per se, but it gives us an idea. The benefit was being around people who could support them, and that's what the community does. And the last thing is purpose. What is your purpose in life? And people who have no purpose are rudderless, disparaged, depressed, and it's critical for us to have some purpose in our lives. And I ask you, do you know what your purpose is in life? You all have one, but you may never have really articulated it to yourself. We're going to jump to one of the lifestyle factors here pertaining to nutrition. And I include the front cover of this book by Michael Pollan. He wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma, also wrote a book called Cooked. This book is called Food Rules. It's a small book. It's an easy read. It's the kind of book you won't want to put down until you finish it. And spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you, summarize the main messages in this book. But I'll tell you, the food rules, it applies to, in each section, there are certain rules that indicate whether you're following the program or not. Here's an example. Let me move on to the next slide. These are the takeaways from it. Eat food. And one of the food rules is that if you're getting your food at a drive-through window, you're not eating real food. Real food is what your grandmother made. It was grown in the earth, or if it was fish or meat, you knew what they fed on. We want our poultry and other animal products to be raised humanely, to have primarily a plant-based diet and not corn. Another consideration around eat food is we don't want to eat processed food. That's the drive-through window reference. The second takeaway is we want our consumption to be mostly plants. Many reasons for this. They're rich in antioxidants, as well as other sources of nutrients. They're also a source of protein. A lot of people aren't really fully aware of that. But let me, this would be a good point to mention. If I can get vitamin B, well, let me say vitamin C from an orange, or I can get vitamin C that's produced in a laboratory. What's the difference? Why don't I just go with the vitamin C that was produced in a laboratory? It's exactly the same chemical structure. Well, here's the answer. You want vitamin C from an orange because there's more than vitamin C that goes with it. There are other molecules associated with vitamin C that help improve its absorption in the body. It's kind of like an entourage effect. You don't get that with the vitamin C that is manufactured. On to the third takeaway, not too much. This is all about portion control. What is a portion of food that you should be eating? Well, the answer is this is a portion, the size of your fist. And he talks about things like if you use a large plate and you put a normal portion on there, your brain psychologically will believe you're not getting enough food. And you're more than likely, when you finish that, to go get another portion. When you use a small plate and put the portion on it, so there's not that much around the rim that shows beyond the food on the plate, then you're more likely to be sated by that portion. Very interesting book. I highly recommend it. This slide shows us a comparison between the standard American diet and the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. In our SAD diet, look at the proportion of food substances that we eat, like rice, potato, bread, and pasta, that are starches. There's nothing wrong with starches per se in small quantities, but starch is broken down by your body into glucose. And when your body is overwhelmed with glucose, what happens to that glucose? It's stored as adipose tissue, fat tissue. And that's why we have an epidemic of being overweight in our society. Another quick fact is 80% of your health characteristics are determined by your zip code. What that means, if you think about it, people who live in socioeconomically deprived neighborhoods, they tend to, there's a large number of fast food restaurants. They feel they don't have enough money to go to the store and get real food. So they rely more on processed food substances that contribute. There's other considerations in that mix, but a lot of it has to do with nutritional choices. When you look at the right, you see the pyramid beginning with physical activity and enjoying meals with others. That's the sense of community, by the way. Look at all the fruits and other substances. And meat plays only a small role in this. So there's a significant difference between these two diets. In the Mediterranean diet, for those of you who don't know, people who live around the Mediterranean Sea tend to have a much lower liability of chronic illness. We got to move on pretty quickly, so I'm going to kind of go through these briefly. The slide on the left is very significant in that stress is managed through your autonomic nervous system, which consists of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system you know of as creating the fight or flight response. It does that in many ways, as you can see, like in releasing glucose from fat stores to increase your blood sugar level. But also, stress is a normal thing we face. And what happens is you'll get this fight or flight response, and then your body will stabilize. But when we are under chronic stress, the sympathetic nervous system is dominating on a constant basis. And that results in havoc to your body because you have a constant release of cortisol. Cortisol is sometimes referred to as the stress hormone. Cortisol levels normally fluctuate in your body, but we don't want them to be continuously elevated. Because one of the things they do is they cause the release of cytokines in the body, and we remember how destructive they can be to various tissues in the body and the brain. The parasympathetic nervous system is our savior in many ways. The parasympathetic nervous system counterbalances the sympathetic nervous system and decreases the level of activity of the sympathetic nervous system. But stress can, and chronic stress in particular, can cause all these things you see on the right-hand side. Head, mood, anger, depression, irritability, lack of energy, same things we talked about earlier. Mind-body therapies for stress reduction. How do we, I could have labeled this, how do we activate the parasympathetic nervous system? Meditation, mindfulness. Mindfulness is actually a type of meditation. Yoga, pranayama. Pranayama just means breath work in Sanskrit. And I'm going to show, one of the slides contains a little type of breath work, the relaxing breath. So we'll see that momentarily. Neurofeedback is another way to elicit stress reduction. Technology called heart rate variability is another way. And there, I'm just mentioning a few. It's a pretty long list, but my go-tos personally are meditation and yoga. This is the relaxing breath I spoke to you about earlier. And it's self-explanatory. I'm thinking you're going to get a copy of this. If you don't have it to download now, I will work to make sure it's added. And then what I've done here is, based on prior experience talking about this subject, when we get to the Q&A section, the most common questions center around supplements, which I can understand. These are resources that I've looked through and feel they do a very good job of talking about vitamins and minerals and supplements. These are PDF documents. So when you get this deck, you'll be able to click on them and open them. And they're multi-page, of course. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Freed. And if you share the slide deck with me, we can share it with attendees. Just send it to me. And we really appreciate it. I wish we had time for questions, but we promised a break from 2:55 to 3. We're going to skip the break and just roll right into the next piece on advocacy. But I really thank you for taking the time. I think it was interesting and educational, and it's good to know that this approach is here along with allopathic medicine. So I'm just switching to my screen so I can see if Elisa's here, but I can't tell.
I'm here.
Okay. All right, I see the switches being made. So Elisa Laporte is, now I don't have her, oh, it is written there so I can say it right. The NAMI Tennessee Policy and Advocacy Director. And I don't know if you can see her yet or not, but I'm sure they'll fix that and you can hear her. And please bring us up to date on NAMI and advocacy. It's a big switch. You know, we've been from education advocacy, but it's a big part. I can see you now. So everybody can see you. Hello. And floor is yours.
Okay, great. So to start out with, I am having a little trouble getting my, I was going to share my screen and I'm having some trouble with that. Let's see. So.
Yeah, Eliza, I can help you.
Okay.
I see that you are sharing your screen. It's just black right now.
Okay. How's that?
I don't see it. Do you have dual screens up?
What I did was I reduced the size of the screen and I can't get it back up to full screen. So I exited full screen and I can't get back to full screen.
Yeah, that might be why, because you shared the specific screen through Zoom. Maybe if you like exit out and then reopen it into full screen or press escape right now, maybe that will help.
Okay. Yeah, this is very strange. I think maybe I should just like call back in.
Maybe just stop sharing your screen for now. And
I don't
oh, that's okay.
yeah, I don't
so
know how to do that.
yeah, I can actually I can just take it away from you, no worries. Oh, it looks like Dr. Freed is sharing the screen still. So maybe, Eliza, I have the settings set so that you can share over them. So you can just click start the share screen, the green button in your Zoom control panel.
Okay, I can't even see the Zoom control panel. I'm sorry. I've minimized the Zoom and I can't maximize it to my, okay.
No worries. So if you, can you hover over? Oh, okay, great.
I don't know what happened, but okay. Share screen. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everybody. Okay, how's that?
Looks great.
All right. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for your patience. I know we're bound to have a few little technical difficulties during the season of COVID. Wish we could all be meeting in person, but I'm so glad you guys are here. So thanks a lot. We're going to talk about advocacy, which is one of the 4 pieces of the mission of NAMI. We provide, as a national organization, support, education, public awareness, and advocacy. So I thought that we would start with a good definition of advocacy so we're all on the same page. So basically, advocacy is public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy. Okay, you can imagine advocacy for a better environment, advocacy for schools, a better school lunches, making sure kids have access to school lunches, there's a whole host of things that we can advocate for. And what is so important with NAMI is that we are the nation's largest grassroots organization on mental illness, providing that voice for mental illness, okay? And we advocate in a number of different ways, from all the way from the halls of Congress to the halls of the state capitol here in Nashville, all the way to your city and county commission buildings, okay? Now, I just want to set the stage here and let you know that if you're here with us today, it means that you have an interest in mental health in some way. Maybe it's just policy. Maybe you want to see better services in your community, but chances are you've had some kind of experience with a mental health challenge. Maybe that's with yourself. Maybe it's with a loved one, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker. And I just want to share with you that we're all here for a reason, and we can use our voices to make monumental changes in mental health policy, okay? So I just want to give you that piece of inspiration. Your story can change minds, and you don't have to be an expert on mental health laws or rules or regulations, okay? So what I'm going to do today is just briefly go through how advocacy works with the NAMI organization and how you can get involved. And I'll also go through some areas where we advocate, right? So I'm going to scroll down here a little bit and talk about our priorities. What is it that we stand for, okay? Well, NAMI National sets the parameters and sets the priorities for what it is that we promote, okay? And so there's 3 areas, and the first is intervene early. And so this is getting mental health services to kids, making sure that schools have mental health services, or at least have a mechanism to get referrals to children who are having problems in school and get them referrals to mental health treatment in the community, okay? So we fight for policies to make sure people get help early. And that could be funding for research, okay? The second area is we make it a priority to improve care. And we fight for policies that ensure that people get the best possible care. This includes through health insurance. And I'll get into that a little bit later, where NAMI Tennessee has gotten involved. And then finally, a policy priority is diverting people from justice involvement. I love this phrase here. NAMI fights for policies to get people help, not handcuffs. You know, we probably know individuals who have interfaced with law enforcement, maybe wound up in jail for no other reason than they were in a mental health crisis. And we partner on a national, state, and local level with entities that are involved with the Crisis Intervention Team program. And I'm sure you've already heard about that today. The CIT program involves a community approach with mental health providers, stakeholders, and the law enforcement community. And it ensures that law enforcement can effectively respond to an individual in a mental health crisis and get them the help they need. So those are some areas where we advocate. Back up to here, improving care. Here at NAMI Tennessee, we've been very involved in 2 specific areas. One is making sure that individuals here in Tennessee have access to healthcare if they are low income, okay? We have TennCare, but TennCare only covers individuals who make up to a certain level of money. And there have been efforts in the past to try to bring in more people, make TennCare available to more people who make lower incomes. And there's been some resistance to that. NAMI Tennessee has been very involved with a coalition, a big group of other nonprofits that are trying to promote what's called Insure Tennessee. And so that's one area where we're trying to make sure that people can tap into TennCare, because if they get TennCare, then they'll be able to get the mental health services like through the TennCare system. Okay. The second area where we've been really active is it's called insurance parity. Now, there's been some federal legislation passed that requires health plans to cover mental health in the same way that they would physical health. So, for example, they can't require you to jump through hoops and prior authorization and get advance permission for mental health services if they don't for physical health services. I mean, you wouldn't need prior authorization to get your leg put in a cast. And so that's insurance parity. And we were involved with some legislation this past year at the state capitol that ensured that would hold the State Department that oversees insurance plans. It would require them to get reports from health insurance plans here in Tennessee to show exactly how they're covering mental health. And unfortunately, that bill didn't get heard because of a virus. It basically shut down the state capitol, but we're going to hopefully come at it next year. Okay. So that gives you a few areas where we get involved. All right. So I'm going to go through the NAMI organization and how advocacy works. First of all, it's at the national level. I explained earlier how they had set the parameters on the 3 areas: intervening early, improving care, so forth. So we actually have a policy team in Arlington, Virginia, that looks at any proposals coming out of the White House, any legislation coming from the US Senate, the US House, and they decide whether it's a good or bad thing. They propose changes, and we have a lobbyist that goes to the Capitol, the US Capitol, and meets with legislators. So at the Capitol, NAMI they're at the table and on important bills involving mental health. And so I'll walk through some ways where you can get involved at the national level. Okay, I'll go through national, state, and then local. When you become a member of NAMI, you will automatically receive periodic emails from the policy staff educating you on certain pieces of legislation and how you can respond. In other words, how you can write your US senator or congressman or congresswoman. They're really good about breaking down the issues so you can understand them. Sometimes this stuff gets so technical. It's easily digestible information, and they actually give you the words to say. So they will write a whole email for you, and all you have to do is sign your name. Click a button, and it'll go to Senator Alexander or Senator Blackburn, usually both. So again, when you become a member of NAMI, you'll learn how to write those letters and get involved with that letter writing campaign at the national level. You can also track what's going on and see what NAMI's position is if you go to this website right there, nami.org/advocacy. And they do a great job of explaining our positions on various bills. And then finally, I would recommend that you learn who represents you in Congress. And you could just do a quick search on Google on that to find out who your representatives are. So then we've got advocacy at the state level. And I put this little picture here because this is a bit of advocacy that I did during Mental Health Month. I approached the State Building Commission and asked if they would light the top of the Capitol in green for Mental Health Month, and they did it one weekend in May. So the lesson there is it never hurts to ask, and it was just beautiful. So many policy decisions take place at the Tennessee General Assembly in Nashville. And NAMI Tennessee actually has a lobbying team. My background is as a professional lobbyist in Florida. And when I moved here a year ago, I then used those skills to put forward toward NAMI Tennessee. And we actually have a professional lobbyist as well that we contract with. So we have, here at NAMI Tennessee, we can, we track legislation that's filed at the state capitol in the House and the Senate. And we weigh in on different bills, like how does this bill affect people in Tennessee? So if you want to get involved at the state level, what you can do is I send out periodic updates on advocacy, so you can read those. And I do the same thing as the NAMI National Office. I'll educate you on the bills, explain what they do, and how you can reach out to your state House member and state Senate member. You can also sign up for our advocacy network. You can do that by going to our website, and it's pretty easy to see. You can become part of our policy advocacy committee. Now that's a group of people that I've pulled together who are interested in policy. They understand a little bit more about legislation, or they have particular areas that they want to focus on, and they could maybe speak to how mental health works in schools or with law enforcement, and they just want to weigh in, okay? Another way to get involved is to, if you're a NAMI member and you belong to one of the affiliates, become its advocacy representative, which automatically puts you on our policy advocacy committee. We can arrange for a NAMI Smarts class. NAMI Smarts is actually a national program that we can do here in Tennessee. We can train you through the NAMI Smarts class on how to take your experience with mental illness and boil it down, bring it down to maybe a 30-second speech, a 2-minute speech, explaining it in a way that you can talk to a legislator easily and efficiently in a short time, and with the most impact. Because let's face it, any of us who've dealt with mental illness, we've got some pretty compelling stories. And then finally, I would encourage you to attend our annual Day on the Hill at the state capitol. And this was held in February this past year, and we'll let you know when it is in 2021. And then finally, we've got affiliate level advocacy, and you can, again, be the advocacy representative. Be sure to read our emails. And then you can take the emails that we send and send them out to your network, to your friends, to your colleagues and family members, okay? So I know we're getting a little bit short on time here. I just wanna also go over some different ways that you can get involved. I've identified 4 different roles that you can play with advocacy. And you can be one of these, you could be all 4. I would just encourage you to consider where you might fit in here, where you might be comfortable. So the first is the storyteller. You've had a mental health challenge, you can talk about it, and with a little bit of coaching, you can share this story with a policymaker, with a senator, a legislator. Your lived experience makes you a subject matter expert. So the next one is the greeter. That's what I call the person who wants to reach out to a legislator, write a letter, make a phone call, even visit them, tell them all about NAMI, what we do, and I can teach you how to do that. And we've got a policy student. You want to learn a little bit more about policy, laws, what they mean, how they work. And then finally, a policy leader. That's the person who knows a lot about the policy areas. Maybe you've worked in law enforcement or a mental health facility, and you see how rules and regulations affect people with mental illness and their families. And you've got something to say about it. So no matter what level you are or you think you are, there's a role for you to play. And I would encourage you to reach out to me if you're interested in learning more at advocacy@namitn.org. So thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. And we had Dr. West, but we need to get him back.
He is on the call.
Okay. Dr. West is a psychiatrist, and it's pretty cool. We've had quite a few psychiatrists in the program this year. And as I mentioned earlier, with COVID, it made it so we can't get together in person, but it's helped us to get, I think, a really blue ribbon panel of presenters and have information about NAMI as well. So I don't want to take more of your time, Dr. West. I'll let you tell a little bit about yourself, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, and is the slide deck up?
Your screen's up, but I don't see it open yet.
I am, says
It
I
was a
am
minute ago.
screen sharing.
Yeah, Dr. West, we can see your screen, but we can see the Zoom page and the file explorer. So if you have maybe multiple
Okay.
screens, you just need to switch screens.
Okay, let me see.
Dr. West, if you just click the PowerPoint button at the bottom of your screen right next to your internet browser to the left,
PowerPoint next.
that one,
Okay.
and then click the little present button down at the bottom right next to the Zoom bar.
The present button by the Zoom bar. That one's befuddling me.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, he meant the zoom in on the PowerPoint. So it's the little icon that looks like
There we go.
we're just a little bit on. There you go, that one.
All right.
So, yeah, the zoom in your PowerPoint,
Okay,
not
now we
Zoom
have-
the application.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you for the opportunity to talk at the NAMI convention. And thank you to NAMI and all of the members for what you do. The advocacy component that was just spoken about is wonderful and so helpful for our patients and for all of us. Just a bit about me. I'm a psychiatrist in Nashville, finished my residency at Vanderbilt in 1986, and since then I've been involved with a private practice on an ongoing basis, was medical director of the neurobehavioral unit at St. Thomas, now St. Thomas West, for 25 or 28 years. And the last couple of years been medical director of BrightQuest Residential Center here in Nashville. And about 10 years ago, I started doing something called transcranial magnetic stimulation, which we'll get to in a bit, as I'm talking about the advances in treatment for depression. Now, depression is a fuzzy word. It's a real nasty word in many ways, but it's also just messy because it means so many different things. And it involves a feeling, and the normal feeling, just like happiness is normal, but the feeling of depression is something that can happen in response to something. But as we talk about it in this context, we're talking about something that is a disorder that has criteria of a number of symptoms over a couple of weeks. I'll get to that in a little bit too. But it is something that has been around forever, talked about in different words, and now depression is something that is clearly increasing. I'm going to give you some numbers just for context. Over the last period of time, the National Institute of Mental Health indicates that 17.3 million adults have depression. The prevalence rate for women is 9%, thereabouts. For men, it's about 5.3%. And for young people, 18 to 25, it's 13.1%. About 64% of people that have depression have what's called severe impairment. About 65% of people get treatment. 6% of those are with medication alone. And about 35% then don't get any treatment. The World Journal of Psychiatry indicates that about 40 to 55% either don't respond at all or have only partial remission. A couple of comments about depression in this time of our life with the pandemic, because we've come out with some recent numbers about from Journal of American Medical Association, shows that the current percentage of people reporting depressive symptoms is 28%, compared to a previous study in 2018 where it was 8.5%. A larger proportion of people that have either low income or increased exposure to COVID stressors have even a higher rate. The CDC indicates that the current rate of suicidal ideation is 11% compared to 4% from 2018. So we're living in some times that are very stressful, very different, and are going, I think, over the next period of time in kind of the post-pandemic recovery, are going to challenge all of us as clinicians and all of us as a system of care to respond. Let me speak a little bit about the consequences of not getting to remission. The residual symptoms of depression when we don't get to remission usually include sleep difficulties, anxiety, and low energy. That leads to all sorts of consequences, particularly one called presenteeism. Many people don't know what that is, but it's basically being there but not fully functional and not being able to do as much as we usually do. The Journal of Occupational Medicine indicates that presenteeism in the United States, the largest cause of it is depression. The slide we've got up here is meant to show that there's is a clear evidence of metabolic dysfunction when people are clinically depressed. This is a PET scan, and on the left is a non-depressed brain. You can see the more yellow parts of it being more activity. On the right, less activity with most of the dark. This is in some ways a good news talk, because as sad as depression is, the good news is that in most cases there can be effective treatment. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So we've talked about what is depression, and in many ways it is a set of symptoms: the sleep difficulties, appetite, concentration, thoughts of suicide, lack of energy, lack of motivation. All of those are symptoms of depression, but they're really reflective of difficulties with the central nervous system in a particular area called the limbic system, which is connected to the frontal cortex. We believe that depression is a result of the neurotransmitter and receptor malfunction. You heard Dr. Freed earlier talk about the serotonin issue. It involves other neurotransmitters, including norepinephrine, dopamine, and the glutamate system, and probably others that we don't have a handle on yet. But there's also something we now talk about over the last period of time called neural circuitry disruption, which I think is a factor with depression as well. But this depression itself is something that's multifactorial. There are, I think, genetic components to it. There are environmental factors to it. As I mentioned earlier, we have a higher rate with people that have a lower income and people that are exposed to various stressors. Such issues exist all the time in various ways for each of us. We have work issues, relationship issues, other factors that can be stressful. That's important, I think, to realize, because what we're doing is dealing with a disorder that has a multifactorial basis, and we need to look at it to treat it in that way, thus leading to an idea that the most optimal treatment is going to be one that incorporates a multitude of ways to help somebody who is depressed. So a little bit more about depression, just to kind of create a sense of it. You can see that it involves different parts of the brain. That's the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. And you can see there how that is evidence of how it's involved with depression. All of the monoamines, and since this slide was created, the glutamate system has more relevance, I think. But all of the different areas have to do with different symptoms that are produced, or different symptoms that are evident. When people are depressed, the concentration is poor, pleasure and interest are limited. There's fatigue, feelings of guilt, worthlessness, mood difficulties, sleep and appetite. All of these areas of the brain that are involved with depression are responsible for those particular symptoms. And we want to try to address all of those. All of the monoamines and neurotransmitters and the neural circuits are connected and involved in that set of geographic area in the brain. What are the treatments that exist? And what I'd like to do is to talk about the treatments and then walk through my approach as I'm talking with a particular patient that comes in and talks about depressive symptoms and how depression is affecting them in their life. The psychotherapy has been around for a long time. There are a lot of different types of psychotherapy. We know that cognitive behavior therapy, interpersonal therapy, and have dialectical behavior therapy. All of those have evidence for being beneficial in treating depression. Pharmacology has been around since about the 50s in terms of any kind of real pharmacology. We've had various efforts to deal in pharmacologic ways for a long time. Neuromodulation has been around also and involves specifically ECT, vagal nerve stimulation, and transcranial magnetic stimulation. Lifestyle changes are also part of the treatment. As I mentioned, one's environment can make a difference in mood, and if there are things in one's environment that need to be addressed, we need to do that. If we go outside and it's too cold, then we put on a sweater. If we go outside, it's too hot, we get inside and turn on the air conditioner or take some other effort to change our environment. Likewise with our mood, if there are factors in our relationships that are causing us distress and facilitating that mood issue, maybe we need to work on communication or conflict resolution. Or we also know that when there is a traumatic event in childhood, that is one factor that lends itself more to depression and more difficulty in having an effective treatment for depression. Years ago, I was given a talk to Stephen's Ministry, and a person asked me, what can we do to prevent depression? And I don't know that we can actually prevent it, but we can certainly be the best parents we can be or the best grandparents we can be, and to try to limit the traumatic experience our children and people in our community have. Again, getting back to the concept of the depressed brain and the non-depressed brain, let me talk a little bit about treatment-resistant depression, because that's something that's a real factor in about 20 to 30% of cases. And that has a different type of approach that some of these treatment modalities will be useful with. The general treatments for depression, as I said, psychotherapy and medication. The evidence that I mentioned earlier indicates that most people are getting some type of combination of treatment, some just medication alone. And most people are going to respond to one or two types of treatment. The levels of care that we have are starting with psychotherapy and or a medication. Typically, we're going to start with an antidepressant and that usually a serotonin-related antidepressant. I'll get to some details about the different ones in a minute. And when a treatment for depression is used, given the STAR-D data that we have from a decade or so ago, about 30% of people will respond to a first type of treatment, and about 20-something% to a second type of treatment. Oftentimes that's complicated because of side effects, and we know that as more and more trials go on, there's less and less of an opportunity for people to respond. When somebody doesn't respond, we want to look and see what kind of, make sure we've got the right diagnosis, make sure they're not complicating medical issues, complicating substance abuse issues. But when people don't respond to a typical course of treatment, we look at the different options. Pharmacologically, we've got tricyclic antidepressants, monoamine oxidase inhibitors, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, and a few others that are not falling neatly in any category. We can think about adjunctive treatment. If somebody's getting psychotherapy, maybe they add a medicine. If they're on a medicine, maybe they try a different medicine or add psychotherapy. We also want to always encourage the lifestyle changes, and specifically with exercise. We know that that helps with depressive treatment. The adjunctive treatments that we usually think about, some of them are older, some of them newer, but the ones I think about are going to be thyroid augmentation with T3, lithium augmentation, the atypical neuroleptics, which can be effective in about 30% of the time, but can have longer term side effects that we have to be concerned about. Other antidepressants as adjunctive treatment to a previous antidepressant I mentioned earlier. And then as Dr. Freed mentioned, the levomethylfolate that is known to be helpful with depression is another one of those. Another pharmacologic endeavor that deals with the glutamate system is ketamine, which has been around for about 30 years as an anesthetic, but some years ago was found to be helpful with depression, at least acutely. And we find that when IV ketamine is used, which is an off-label use, because the studies haven't been done for the FDA to respond to it, shows that about 64% of people have a response, according to a study in 2013. And then there is always a relapse of symptoms, and typically that's between 1 and 12 weeks, typically 19 days thereabouts. The esketamine, which is now approved by the FDA for treatment of depression and depression with, or I should say depression that is not responsive to 2 different medicines, and for depression with acute suicidal ideation, is a stereotypic isomer of ketamine, and it does have an FDA approval to be taken with an antidepressant, and in that, when that is used with an antidepressant, at 4 weeks we have a 52% response rate and a 37% remission rate. At 12 weeks there's a 13% relapse rate, and at 24 weeks there's a 32% relapse rate. There is evidence long-term that shows that continued use of esketamine with the ongoing use of antidepressants delays the time to relapse. There are a few factors with esketamine in terms of monitoring. It can increase blood pressure. There is an inability to drive on the days of the treatment. It requires 2 treatments a week for 4 weeks, and then every 1 to 2 weeks for an extended period of time. There can be some abuse with it, but it's highly monitored. The neuromodulation types of treatment that we have available include electroconvulsive therapy, which has been around since 1938. And there's evidence in studies, there haven't been any real randomized control studies since the mid-'80s with ECT, but evidence is that 30 to 80% of people will respond. Typically, I think of it in that 60, 70% range. At 6 months, there's about a 50% relapse. The vagal nerve stimulation, which has been FDA cleared since 2005, is an implantation of a device that's wrapped around the vagus nerve. It is for depression that has not responded to multiple antidepressant trials, and it's considered to be an adjunct and serially resistant major depression. But we have some new information about it that's positive. We do know in the early studies, we know that at 3 months, about 37% of people will respond, and about 7% have remission. But at 5 years, 68% of people respond, and 43% have demonstrated remission. The transcranial magnetic stimulation, I'll spend a little bit more time on, since that's something I've got experience with over the last decade as I brought it to Tennessee in 2010. It was cleared by the FDA in 2008 to treat depression that hasn't responded to previous antidepressant treatment. It has been, when we started doing it, there were about 120 different sites. Now there are thousands of sites that are doing this. One of the interesting pieces of this is that there's now an outcomes registry looking at thousands of patients, overall 8+ thousands of people, that find that when the treatment is done in the prescribed protocol from the FDA, and that rating scales are being used, that there's a 69% response rate, a 36% remission rate. At 6 months, the relapse rate is 11%, and at a 52-week study that was done, the relapse rate was 32%. Of that 32%, when people were retreated with half the number of treatments, all of them responded. But let me tell you a little bit about TMS to just give you a handle, as it doesn't have the awareness that I would like it to have, and that I think it deserves. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS as we call it, uses an MRI type of magnet, MRI strength magnet, to stimulate a certain part of the body. It is a non-invasive treatment. It's an outpatient procedure. People recline in a chair, and a gantry holds a magnet over the left forehead to stimulate the dorsolateral left prefrontal cortex. Each treatment has 3,000 pulses. There are some variable treatment systems, so the one I'm talking about has 3,000 pulses. It takes 18 minutes and 45 seconds. There are no significant side effects. Sight discomfort, because you're stimulating the nerve fibers in the scalp, is the most common, and people generally tolerate that quite well and get used to it. The treatment is 30 treatments over 6 weeks, ideally, though because of various schedules, it can sometimes be different. Most people start feeling better at treatment 20 to 25. And when people get better, they tend to stay well. Sometimes they get off medicines, sometimes they are on less medicines. That varies. We do encourage people to use psychotherapy while they're having treatment, and also to continue with that, because we find that people are better psychotherapy patients after treatment. We think that's because of the neural circuitry activation with all those parts of the limbic system that are coming together, because they have better ways of communicating to handle the stressful events, and all to handle the issues, and to problem solve using the frontal cortex. So let me just walk you through how I approach it when somebody has depression and they come in the office. The first thing is to get the history, to understand somebody, kind of what makes them tick, but also understand the symptoms that they have, understand how they've approached it in the past. Most people that I see now have been on a number of different treatments, but you want to make sure that if they haven't been on treatment, that you walk through the process and outline, just as I did a little bit ago, about the different options that people have, so that they can participate in it. We know that a therapeutic alliance is also a big factor in treating people that have depression, I would say, with anybody that sees a physician. But particularly with depression, you want somebody that's really connected to you, and is going to be able to trust what you say, and collaborate on the options. So some people prefer a non-medication route, psychotherapy. Some people just really don't yet want to talk about issues, and they're going to think about a medicine. And some people, it's combined. And when that works, that's great. If somebody has side effects, you want to understand what that is, so you can then give some alternatives, so they can find a treatment that's going to be most effective for them. When treatments don't work, and as I indicated, unfortunately they don't, despite efforts, good efforts, sometimes people are refractory, then we talk about the different options, and whether that's switching medicines, finding objective therapies and going through the pros and cons of that, or thinking about some of the newer types of treatments that might include esketamine, might include neuromodulation. We go through the pros and cons on that, so that they can find something that can work. Again, the good news in this is that we can usually find a treatment that's going to bring about relief, and we hope remission. Let me stop there and see what questions there might be. Are there any questions that I might be able to respond to?
I gave you a question, Dr. West. What about TMS for other diagnoses?
Good question. There is FDA clearance for certain types of TMS for obsessive compulsive disorder. There's also one for smoking cessation. There are a number of studies that are being done to look at different options or ways that TMS can be used in a neurological sense, but also for other psychiatric issues such as generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar depression, PTSD, and it seems to have some positive efforts in all of those conditions, and studies are ongoing. Post-stroke recovery and some of the things with negative symptoms in schizophrenia, autism. So there are a number of things that are being looked at.
Also, another question came to me. You mentioned exercise. What about mindfulness, being in nature, things like that? Is there any scientific evidence?
There is evidence that those mindfulness and being out and about in nature are going to be of help in terms of creating the better environment for us. But it doesn't, there's no evidence that I've seen that specifically that in and of itself is going to treat depression.
And another question is, can you review the differences between a depressed brain and a non-depressed brain?
The differences that we know of are that the depressed brain has less ability to be active. It is doesn't metabolize oxygen and glucose, which are specifically what the slide that I have up here is looking at. Blood flow, oxygen, blood sugar. There is less ability for the brain to use the neurotransmitters. Whether that's a deficiency of neurotransmitters, we used to think so. It's now more thought to be a matter of the receptors are not working as effectively. The neural circuits are not as robust. We know that a number of treatments in the neuromodulation era and ketamine and esketamine seem to be increasing the plasticity in the brain, which allows more brain fibers to grow and the brain to communicate better with itself.
More questions are coming. This one is broader than depression, but if you would take a stab at it, I'd appreciate it. How about the pacing back and forth? How to manage those? Is the restlessness an adverse reaction of medication? How to manage this?
Okay, their restlessness can mean a lot of different things. It's like depression. It can be different things. Sometimes there are specific medication-induced restlessness, something called akathisia, which the neuroleptic medicines can do, but also the tricyclics can do, and the serotonin medicines can do. So it could be, restlessness can be a medication-induced symptom, but it can also be a manifestation of depression or anxiety because it generates a very restless aspect of one's psyche. And one way to deal with that is to walk around and be fretful in a sense. In that case, there are medications that can help with that type of phenomenon.
Okay, I'm going to keep going through these for a couple more minutes. Treatment for children and adolescents.
Great question. The numbers are building in terms of our youth, our children. We don't have as much evidence for medications in teenagers. There is evidence for a couple of different serotonin antidepressants that can be helpful. It's certainly something to talk about with a prescriber, but also the psychotherapy and neurofeedback have demonstrated benefit for depression and other treatment issues with children.
Okay, thank you. Do you know if TennCare covers TMS?
They do cover it. They are somewhat restrictive from my standpoint and how that's manifested, but it is covered, yes.
Okay. And what is the folate procedure? I don't know if that was from Dr. Freed or if you're familiar with that.
Yes, the folate, there are a couple of different ways to look at it. I will often approach it with just offering that as an option because it's a fairly benign option and it can help. In that one study that was done, there were no genetic testing that was done to show whether people had it. It was just used as an augmentation or adjunctive treatment. There is a genetic test that can show whether we are deficient in the enzymes that metabolite folic acid. And if we do have that particular enzyme deficiency, it is something that can and should be used. It is a metabolic food that can be obtained by prescription to get L-methylfolate so it can automatically go into the central nervous system.
Thank you. There's a question about use of psychedelics in treatment. I have to find it. You didn't as yet mention psychedelic assisted therapy as a treatment for resistant depression. Could you comment on that?
Sure. There are a couple of different psychedelics that have been used for years in experimental ways. Johns Hopkins is working on that with others, and now it's on an off-label way has come into reality. There is MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. There is ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. They're, to me, interesting, but the data is not there for me to feel compelled that, and it has not been presented to the FDA yet for clearance.
Thank you. What about marijuana? There's a statement about PTSD, veterans, marijuana. Any findings there to share?
There's
Medical
interesting clinical information about that. There's nothing conclusive about it. There are anecdotal reports that it can be helpful, both in terms of medical marijuana and recreational marijuana is the feedback that I get from people, but that we don't have the studies yet that are going to be persuasive to me to make that as a formal recommendation.
Okay, this may be related. Endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome, is this a mental health diagnosis?
It's not in the DSM. I can't say whether it does or doesn't exist. Again, falls into that category of things that are interesting.
Okay, and there's really the last question I see here right now is about cost of TMS and ketamine, and I don't know if that's, I imagine there's not ketamine with TennCare at all, I would guess, but I don't know. And private cost insurance?
I have not heard that there is, that TennCare does cover ketamine. I know it doesn't cover ketamine. Whether it covers S-ketamine, which is the FDA cleared isomer, I do not know. I've not heard that it does. The cost of the various procedures is going to vary depending on insurance. TMS is covered by all the major insurance companies, so that makes a difference. If you have insurance of any sort, you're going to have coverage for that, and that depends on what your co-payments and out-of-pocket stuff. S-ketamine, there are only a couple of insurance companies that cover that now, and on an outpatient basis, I haven't heard what the actual cost is. I have heard that the overall cost, and particularly when you add in the ongoing treatment, that it can be quite expensive, but I don't know the specifics of that.
Okay. Similarly, we're going to have two more questions. One is again about costs. If you don't have insurance, there's private pay. Is there such thing as sliding scale or any of that kind of thing for TMS, or it's probably more private people than agencies that have alternative funding? Takes alternative funding to do sliding scale typically.
That is true, and it is TMS is more in the private practice realm. I hope that changes at some point soon. And in terms of any type of sliding scale, my suggestion is to contact at the organization or the clinician that is offering it and ask that question directly. I can't speak for the large group of people that do it.
Okay, very good. The last one is about genetic testing, and this has thoughts on genetic testing. What about the folate test, recommended labs? But there's also testing for depression meds, and is that worthwhile?
Good question, and I think depends on who you ask whether it's worthwhile. The genetic testing doesn't tell us which medicines are going to work. It tells us based on our genetic profile how we metabolize medicines, so which medicines are going to be more likely for us to be able to respond to based on how we metabolize them, but it doesn't tell us which ones work. The best person to get genetic testing on is somebody that's had problems with different medicines, but we only know that if we get the testing done. So it's something I would encourage somebody to talk to their own clinician about in their particular situation, whether it is something to pursue. There is some evidence that if it's done on the very front end before you take any medicines, you'll take fewer medicines to get to the right one.
Okay, I was asked to stop the questions, but I got another one on CBD oil. This is the very last one. Last question. CBD oil?
It falls in that category of something that's interesting. About 50% of the people that use it that I'm aware of give information that it's positive, that it's helping them with their sleep or their anxiety, not as much depression, and another 50% that say that it's not helping. It is not. It's something that you don't know the source of it. You don't know how real it is. So if you're going to use it, I'd find a source that has validity.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. West. And people have asked about the slide decks. If they're shared with us, easiest way is info@namitn.org. We'll send an email to the presenters. So thank you. And Gabe Howard, if you're here, please wrap us up and give us instructions on how to visit with our sponsors.
I'm here. Thank you so much, Dr. West. That was absolutely amazing, and we really, really appreciate you. This is normally where I'd say another big round of applause for our speaker, but you know, it's virtual. Thank you, everybody. So here is all the information you need to know. Excuse me. Please come back tomorrow. We have so much cool stuff planned. We have the 3 pillars of NAMI. We have a plenary address. We have a Black Experience in Mental Health. We're going to give an update for NAMI 2020. Let you know what we've done, and NAMI 2021, let you know what we're gonna do. We have mental health and law enforcement. We have caring for your child's social and emotional well-being. We have something called the Jeff and Gabe Show, which I am super excited about. And we also have the movie Bedlam and a panel discussion, and honestly, so much more that I didn't even have time to mention. So tomorrow is gonna be an incredible day. We sincerely hope that you will join us, but we're not done today. We have the sponsor networking session. Now, listen, here's what you need to know. To join the sponsor networking session, you need to return to the landing page and then click join. Look in the chat box. The link is in the chat box if you don't know how to get back to the landing page. So just click that, head on over to that landing page, click join for the sponsor networking session, and we will see you there, and then we will see you tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for an amazing and wonderful day 1. We will see you at the sponsor networking session, and then we will see you for day 2.